And welcome into another film edition of the Tennessee Star Report. I'm Steve Gill. We're visiting today with Senior Senator Lamar Alexander. Not a tribute to his age, it's just the status he has as a senator from Tennessee. And
well,
Lamar, we go way back to when I started right out of law school.
Are you going to
confess
this?
I'm confessing that.
May hurt you.
It was after college, though. So
well, but we started in college because I appointed you to the University of Tennessee Board of Trustees. Because you were an outstanding student leader, not very good basketball player.
But, usually this position.
But really good student leader, and that's when you really got started in public life as far as I know.
Long before cell phones, you actually called me to appoint me to the student member of the Board of Trustees position, and I thought I was getting punked and pranked by my friends, so I said, yeah, right, and hung up on you the first time. Your office immediately called back, and I had to claim, yeah, we had a bad connection.
I did that because I placed my own calls. I usually found that was courteous rather than having somebody say, will you please hold for Governor Alexander? You know, people want to say, no, I don't think I want to do that. So
others of us just hung up on you and you had to have them call back.
Yeah.
This has been the most bizarre, contentious. I think Brett Kavanaugh described it as the Twilight Zone, and then one of your fellow colleagues described today, I think Senator Kennedy, as something like the intergalactic bar scene from Star Wars. You've been involved in politics for a long time. Have you ever seen anything remotely this vicious?
No, and I don't like it, and you don't have to go back very far to find when it was like it should be. I mean, you can go back to the confirmation hearings for Justice Scalia, the most conservative member of the court, Justice Ginsburg, the most liberal member of the court. They each were almost unanimously confirmed in the end because they both were qualified. And they were both treated with respect. And now we treat a presidential nominee for the Supreme Court as if he or she were innocent until nominated. You know, almost if they've been released from San Quentin, no matter how fine a background they had. I mean, Brett Kavanaugh has the kind of background that any mother or father would hope for their son or child. And the idea that he should be subjected to this really is very, very embarrassing, I think, for the country and for the United States Senate.
Is there a way to put the toothpaste back in the tube, or is this what we're going to get going forward? We have not seen Republicans behave this way when you had a Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan come forth. Your colleague Lindsey Graham pointed out he voted for them and would never have done this to them, and yet the Democrats are showing this is where we're going.
Well, I voted for Sotomayor because she was, not because I agreed with her, but because she was qualified. I would have voted for Elena Kagan, but I didn't like the fact that she didn't allow the military to recruit on the Harvard campus, and so I voted no on that. But I mean, I think we do have to get the toothpaste back in the tube. I mean, the courts are not supposed to be a political place. Of course, they reflect it to some degree, but you're not supposed to know what the result's going to be when you go into court. That's why you have a judge. So this is we're going to pay for this for a long time. This is very bad, and I'm not going to act like this, but I hope senators will try to get back to the Justice Scalia, Justice Ginsburg type of confirmation process.
Is it your sense that regardless of what happens with Judge Kavanaugh, that the next one may be even worse? My sense has been this has really not been about Trump or even him, but the next one that comes up and laying the marker of, if you think this is bad, wait till you see what we've got next, so that anybody the president calls and says, hey, I'd like you to nominate you to the U.S. Supreme Court, their answer is going to be, are you kidding? I saw what happened.
Well, you might think that. I don't see how it could be worse, really. But you would think that about running for a United States Senator, running for governor, given what you go through to do it today. But we've got no shortage of candidates, and actually no shortage of good candidates. So I guess they're just people who love the country and admire public service and want to be a part of it.
And it would have been easy for Judge Kavanaugh to have backed out of this and said, look, I don't need this. This is not fair, and I'm not going to participate in it. But he's going to be a fighter, and he showed us yesterday.
No, he is a fighter, and you know, the point, all this talk about FBI, there have been 6 background checks of Judge Kavanaugh by the FBI since the alleged incident 36 years ago. And not one of the 6 FBI background checks turned up anything, not a whiff of anything like this. So another FBI investigation, even of the charges, you know, it won't turn up anything. It's just they come to you and say, what did you think? And then they go to me, what do I think? And then they say, Steve said, Lamar said, Mary said, Joe said, and they give it back to the senators, and then they have to make a judgment. So I have all the information I need to make a judgment. I felt very sorry for Dr. Ford. A sexual assault case is never an easy thing, and it's never easy to decide either. I mean, she seemed to believe what she believed. But it wasn't a case of he said, she said. It was he said, she said, they said. And all the they were the four other people that were there, and they all swore on the penalty of perjury that the event never happened. So to me, that was enough.
And then the holes that were pointed out, the inconsistencies in terms of who was paying for polygraphs, who was paying for lawyers. Is she afraid to fly when she flies all over the world but couldn't come to Washington to testify? Those just are little nicks and holes in her credibility. The Republican Judiciary Committee clearly made the decision not to go after her at all, to show complete deference, not challenge her credibility with her high school background, her college background, while they were delving into Brett Kavanaugh's. Should they have found out more about her background from a credibility standpoint and risked the backlash?
Well, not for me. I mean, I don't think the American people would have appreciated taking a woman who decided, for whatever reason, to go on national television like that and tell that story and treat her any way but courteously. That doesn't mean you have to believe what she says or disagree with Judge Kavanaugh, but I think someone who believes they've been a victim of a sexual assault needs to be treated with a lot of respect. So does the accused. I ran into lots of women in the last week who said, I have a son too. I want my daughter to be treated with respect. But if my son grows up to be good enough to be nominated for the Supreme Court, I don't want him treated like this.
You have daughters and sons.
Mm-hmm.
So you see it both ways, of you want your daughters treated right, but you also want your sons to be treated right in any kind of process.
Yeah, that's right. And I want the United States Senate to rise above this. I mean, this is really embarrassing for the Senate. I mean, we live in a fractured country. You know, I get criticized sometimes for making compromises and deals because I like to try to get results. For example, we're going to be voting this week on the opioids bill. We've got 37 Democrats, 35 Republicans have agreed on everything we can think of to do about the opioids epidemic, which is the most serious public health epidemic we've got. Well, you've got to work with people to do something like that. You've got to work across the aisle to do that. So I think the American people want us to try to get results, but when we have a clear point of view, like Kavanaugh, I think he wants to stick up for our point of view.
I want to come back to the opioids and some of the other issues, but as we sit here on a Friday when this whole Kavanaugh confirmation process is still in flux.
Right.
Now apparently a request for an FBI investigation. It may be voted next week, early or late. As you kind of look at it right now, where do you see it going? Again, while we know it changes minute by minute.
Well, I don't want to predict what will happen because who knows what will happen. But Judge Kavanaugh said he had no problem with an FBI investigation. I have no problem with one. If some senators would feel better with one, I just don't need one to make my decision. If there have been 6 FBI background checks since the alleged incident, and every one who was at the alleged incident says it didn't happen, and they've sworn to that, then I don't know what an investigation of that incident will turn out. But I don't need that. But if we have one, in the Anita Hill case with Clarence Thomas, they had an FBI background check, which Joe Biden said was not worth anything, by the way, and it lasted 3 days. So if there is an FBI background check, I would expect it to delay everything only by a few days.
Well, you mentioned the opioid vote. Marsha Blackburn has been criticized by Phil Bredesen, by 60 Minutes, by a guy who wrote a book that he's trying to sell that is a whistleblower for an opioid bill that passed unanimously in the House and the Senate, and President Barack Obama signed it. Has there been any follow-up in terms of whether the regulatory, the law enforcement officials don't like that bill? They've had 2 years to do a study and say it's not working or that it is working, and my understanding is we haven't heard anything.
To do a bottom line on that, that's not Marsha's fault. I mean, that was a bill that passed the House unanimously. President Obama supported it and signed it.
Chuck Schumer spending $3.5 million attacking Marsha on it. He voted for it.
People do that. But it's not her fault. It created some unintended consequences. Nobody understood that it would. And there's a bipartisan effort going on right now to fix the problem. So the better thing to do about opioids is what we're doing this week, which is to pass legislation to stop fentanyl from coming into the country, to expand non-addictive treatment so you can take something for your pain other than something addictive, to let the FDA require manufacturers to sell opioids in blister packs with fewer packs, and expand treatment, all these things. That's where the focus should be. That was a bill that everybody supported at the time that had unintended consequences, and it's not Marsha Blackburn's fault.
The tariff disputes are another big issue that's in the news, and President Trump is using the bully pulpit and a strong negotiating tactic to try to get other countries to open their goods, products, and services to ours by saying, look, if you want high tariffs, we'll do the same thing.
Yeah.
The goal is to lower them everywhere, and right now, as the president points out, our dairy products going into Canada pay 300% tariffs. The goal is to bring them down, not to try and raise ours.
He's right about the dairy products, but he's wrong about this. I mean, I've talked to the president many times privately about it, and I agree with him on taxes, I agree with him on regulations, I agree with him on Obamacare, I agree with him on opioids, and I've said, Mr. President, this is going to hurt us. Using tariffs to get their attention a few times might be okay, but the Nissan vehicles that are made in Tennessee are 70% steel. The price of steel is up 40% this year since the tariffs. It doesn't take a math major to figure out what happens. In Electrolux, they've canceled a $250 million expansion because steel prices have gone up. U.S. steel prices. Bridgestone, which is right across town here, is paying 20% more for steel cord for its tires because it's not made in the United States. President Bush tried the same tactic and had to withdraw because it killed more jobs than it saved. So I would rather see the president focus on his zero tariffs goal, which is what the North American free trade is. There is an issue with dairy. Maybe he can improve that a little bit. And let's try to get a zero tariffs, zero subsidy, zero non-tariff barrier agreement. He said that, and I've encouraged him to focus on that. But piling tariffs on top of tariffs is going to hurt us. It's going to undo the tax cuts. It's going to hurt the economy over time.
There's talks about making some of the tax cuts permanent because of the rules. You can only do them on a short-term basis for some of the individual tax cuts. There's talk of coming back. It hasn't been able to come out of the House. Do you see, if Republicans keep the Senate and the House, that next year there will be a permanency to some of the tax cuts and maybe do more?
I'd like to. I think we've proved this year that the tax reductions, I carry around, people say, why don't you all ever do anything? And I carry this card around, and let's see, best economy in 18 years,
Check.
Lower taxes 31
Check.
years, military support up best in 15 years, repeal regulations. The tax cuts and the regulatory reforms have given us the best economy we've had in a long, long time. If we can find the money to do it, we should make some of those tax cuts permanent, especially the corporate tax cuts.
President Trump says that the regulatory reductions have actually done more to spur the economy at this point, even than the tax cuts, because the individual tax cuts haven't really even been felt yet. Do you think the regulatory cuts have been really what spurred this more than anything else?
I think he's right about that. If President Trump would focus all of his comments on taxes, regulatory reform, energy, what he's done to try to improve health care, increasing the military, record funding for biomedical research, he's done all those things. He's got the best economy we've had in 18 years. Very few presidents could accomplish that much, and he needs a Republican Senate and House in order to get it done.
Why isn't he? I mean, it is a great track record. I mean, you're a former education secretary, former president of university, your parents were educators. What kind of grade would you give him, and why isn't it translated?
I'm not going to grade him because he's pretty good because he won the race, and I tried and I didn't. So for me to try to give him advice about what to do, but my advice to him when I see him, and I see him fairly often, and he listens well, he listens respectfully, even when we disagree, is that focus on your accomplishments. Focus on the things that you've done, because you've done more. Taxes, regulations, judges, just those three things would be enough for any 4-year term for a president. And it's given us this terrific economy. People understand that, but when you get off at all this other stuff, it covers it up.
Let's talk a little politics in the last few minutes we have. If the Democrats take the Senate, Dianne Feinstein, who we've seen on parade this week, becomes chairman of the Judiciary Committee. You lose your chairmanship. Who replaces you?
Could be Bernie Sanders.
And that's like
That's a big
health
change.
and human services.
That's health, education, labor, and pensions.
It's all the places you put socialism.
Yeah, that is. Well, it is. I mean, it means Medicare for all. If you like your employer insurance, for example, about half Tennesseans get their insurance on the job. They want to get rid of that and let the government do it all. If you want to give the federal government more control of local schools, that's what they would like to do. If you would like to go back the opposite direction on the National Labor Relations Board, that's probably where the biggest changes have come in policy. They would come if we don't have a majority in the House and in the Senate.
So a Tennessee vote choice between Phil Bredesen, who would put those folks in charge, and Marsha Blackburn is whether you stay as chairman, whether or not the other Republican senators stay chairman, and whether or not Chuck Schumer becomes the majority leader in the Senate.
Well, that's true. That's correct. I don't have anything bad to say about Phil Bredesen, but the fact of the matter is that President, we wouldn't have the tax cuts, we wouldn't have the regulatory changes, we wouldn't have the different NLRB, we wouldn't have the good economy if we didn't have the Republican majority in the United States Senate.
Sitting here today with the election not that far away, a lot of Democrats having to run for re-election in states that Donald Trump carried, more likely or less likely that Republicans keep the Senate?
I think more likely. I mean, first, the map's good. We have some advantages there. And second, the economy's good. I used to work for a very wise man named Bryce Harlow, who you knew about or knew. And he said, the issues are always peace and prosperity. And while the president's rattled the rest of the world, I mean, if you take a look at North Korea, things are a little better off there than they were. And at home, they're better off than they've been at any time that anybody can remember. Everybody, I mean, wages are going up, revenues are going up, profits are up, economy's great. Usually people give you credit for that.
Senator Lamar Alexander, thank you for being with us. We'll do this again sometime soon. We've been doing this for a long time.
We have, Steve. Great to see you.
We'll get back together. I'm Steve Gill. This is the Tennessee Star Report. Go to TennesseeStar.com. You'll find this video, and we'll be interviewing the senator again repeatedly. Thank you. Thank you, sir.